Welcome, wayward souls. We follow a story that rises from the older layers of the Appalachians, the places where the soil keeps its secrets close and the dark moves with its own quiet purpose. If these journeys into the uncanny stay with you, if they settle in the corners of your mind long after the episode ends, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. It helps these echoes travel a little further beyond the tree lines. So light your lanterns and settle in. The mountains are waiting. The mountains had been uneasy for days, though nothing in particular announced it. The air simply carried a tension that didn't belong to weather. The soil felt unsettled beneath the boots of anyone who walked the ridgelines, as if something beneath the surface had begun to shift in its sleep. Even the birds kept to the lower branches, wings held tight, watching the tree line with a wary patience. Dante Smith moved through the dusk with quiet certainty of someone who understood when a landscape was changing its mind. He wasn't a man given to superstition, but he knew the difference between a forest at rest and a forest listening. Tonight the listening was almost palpable. The trees stood too still. The wind refused to commit to a direction, and the whole slope felt as though it were waiting for something to rise. Old stories clung to this part of the Appalachians, like lichen on stone. Stories older than the graves, older than the settlers, older than the first carved warnings left on bark. The Cherokee had spoken of pale people who lived beneath the ground, emerging only under moonlight. Moon-eyed, they were called. White-skinned, wide-eyed, unable to bear the sun. A people driven out, or driven down. The stories never seemed to agree, but the land remembered them. It always had. Dante paused at the edge of a clearing, the last of the light thinning across the forest floor. The silence around him deepened, thickening like a damp earth. Somewhere beneath the soil something shifted, stone against stone, faint but deliberate. The mountains were waking up old memories, and they were doing it through him. Night settled over the ridge in a way that felt deliberate, as though darkness had weight, had intentions. The last of the light drained from the treetops, leaving the forest floor washed in a thin, colourless glow. And Dante moved carefully through the undergrowth, guided less by sight and more by the quiet pull of something in the trail. The stone wall emerged slowly between the trees, almost as if the forest was reluctant to reveal it. A long, uneven spine of stacked rock, its surface mottled with lichen and age. No mortar, no pattern, just a serpentine barrier curling through the woods. Too ancient to belong to any settler, and too strange to fit any known purpose. Local historians argued over its origin. Some claimed it was the remnant of a fortification. Others insisted it was nothing more than a boundary line abandoned by time. But the Cherokee stories said otherwise. They spoke of a people who built without sunlight, shaping stone by touch, pale hands working in the cool hours of the night, stacking rock in patterns that made sense only to those who lived beneath the earth. The moon-eyed people. Dante approached the wall with caution of someone nearing a sleeping animal. The stones radiated a cold that didn't belong to the evening air, a subterranean chill, as though the wall were a vent for something buried far below. Moss clung to the cracks in thick, damp sheets, and the scent rising from it was metallic. He rested a hand against the stone, and the surface just felt wrong. Not rough, like you'd expect, but almost pulsing. A rhythmic throb, steady as a heartbeat, muffled by centuries of soil. The story said the Moon-Eyed people were driven out by the Cherokee when the sun returned. A cleansing light, a reckoning. But some versions whispered that the Pale Ones had not fled far. They had simply gone deeper. The wall shuddered beneath Dante's palm. Subtle but unmistakable. And the forest reacted instantly. Leaves trembled without wind. A ripple passed through the undergrowth, and the birds that had been watching from the branches vanished in a single frantic burst of wings. The mountains were not just remembering, they were opening. The forest changed before Dante realised why. The shift in the air, like the moment before a storm, when the pressure drops and the world seems to almost brace itself. The trees no longer stood as individuals, but as a single watching body. Their branches leaning inward, closing the canopy, until the moonlight thinned to a colourless smear. The sound came next. Not footsteps, but something softer. A drag of weight across leaf litter, slow and deliberate. The undergrowth trembled in a widening arc, circling rather than approaching. Dante held still. The darkness between the trees thickened, not with shadow but with shape. Pale, low to the ground and almost luminescent. A figure emerged only halfway, its outline wrong in a way I resisted naming. Limbs too slight, eyes reflecting the light like whetstone. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe, it just watched him, head tilted with a slow, animal-like curiosity, as though trying to understand the purpose of the thing standing upright before it. Another shape joined it, then another, and another. Not stepping forward, just watching. Their movements were soundless, but the air around them carried a faint chill, the kind that seeped from deep caverns where sunlight never reaches. The story said the Moon-Eyed people were completely blind in daylight, but that the night was theirs, the moon was theirs, and the forest, in this hour, belonged entirely to them. The first figure shifted its weight and the others mirrored it with perfect synchronicity. A ripple of pale bodies. The stone wall behind Dante pulsed again, and their heads snapped toward the stones, bodies tightening, as though something beneath the earth had called to them. The ground beneath Dante's boots trembled, and the moon-eyed shapes leaned closer, waiting. The forest held its silence with a tension that felt almost physical. The pale figures remained low to the ground, their bodies arranged in a loose crescent that shifted whenever he moved. Not with aggression, but more a strange, deliberate curiosity. Their eyes reflected the moonlight in a way that made them seem hollow, as if the light passed through rather than ran into them. They pressed closer to the earth, listening with a devotion that bordered on reverence. And the stone wall behind Dante seemed to answer with a low resonant groan. Cold air seeped from between the stones, carrying with it the scent of damp caverns. Dante stepped back, but the ground moved with him. A seam in the soil widened at his feet, deepening with a slow, deliberate crack, and the forest floor sagged inwards, not collapsing, but opening. The pale figures shifted again, their bodies angling towards the widening seam. Their movements were ritualistic, as if responding to a signal Dante couldn't hear. One of them lifted its face towards the moon, and for the briefest of moments its features sharpened in the light. Skin stretched tightly over bone, eyes far too large for the skull beneath, and a mouth small and expressionless. A breath of cold air rose from the opening, heavy with a scent of stone and stagnant water. Beneath it lay darkness. Not the absence of light, but a depth so complete it seemed to swallow the moon's reflection before it even reached the surface. The stories had always disagreed on where the Moon-Eyed People went when the Cherokee drove them out. Some said they fled west. Others said they all died out. But the oldest stories, the ones whispered rather than written, claimed that they had simply gone down into the hollows, into the pale below. The seam widened into a narrow passage, sloping sharply into the earth. The pale figures rose, their bodies trembling with anticipation, as though the opening were a summons. Dante felt the pull of it. Not physically, but something deeper. A pressure behind the ribs, a quiet insistence. And the forest around him seemed to lean inwards, urging him towards the dark. The opening yawned wider. Pale figures remained at the edges of the clearing, their bodies angled towards the darkness. They did not move to follow Dante, nor to stop him. They simply watched, as though his descent was not a choice, but an inevitability. The air from below carried the scent of minerals and stagnant water and an organic musk. The soil around the opening was soft, disturbed as though something had been pushing upwards for a long time. Dante stepped towards the passage, and the ground accepted his weight, the earth shifting underfoot with a pliancy. The narrow slope forced him to angle his body, one hand against the wall. The texture was wrong. It wasn't like loose earth, but not like stone either. It was something in between, compacted and smooth, shaped by hands. The pale figures above lowered themselves closer to the ground. Their stillness was absolute, their patience unnerving, watching as Dante descended. The passage tightened around him, the ceiling dropping low enough that he had to bow his head, and the air grew colder and heavier. The walls bore faint impressions, shallow grooves repeating patterns. Not symbols or writing, but more like the memory of touch, like fingers dragging, palms pressing, generations shaping the earth into something that almost resembled architecture. A faint sound rose from deeper below, a slow rhythmic clicking, like stone tapping against stone. It echoed through the narrow passage, each click followed by a soft, wet shift. Dante's hand brushed against a section of wall that felt different. He paused, tracing the surface. It wasn't soil at all now, but bone. The clicking grew louder. The passage opened abruptly into a chamber, its ceiling lost entirely in the shadows. The floor was uneven, patchwork of stone and something softer, maybe desiccated moss or shed skin. And there, arranged in a wide arc along the far side of the chamber, were the remnants of something ritualistic. Not objects, but impressions. Depressions in the earth where bodies had knelt. Grooves worn smooth by repeated movement. A central hollow, circular and deep, heavy enough to leave a permanent mark. And the clicking stopped. Then, from the far end of the chamber, something shifted. The darkness there was deeper, layered as though the shadows themselves were folding around a shape that had not yet decided whether to reveal itself. The air changed, and the chamber breathed. It didn't reveal its shape all at once. It unfolded slowly, as though the darkness were reluctant to surrender anything more than the barest of outlines. Dante stood at the threshold, and a low hum filled the space. Through the earth, through the air, through the thin layer of skin on Dante's arm, a resonance. Something moved in the far corner of the chamber. Not a shift of shadow, nor a trick of the light, a deliberate movement, slow, heavy, as though whatever lived here had never needed to rush. The darkness folded around it, concealing more than it revealed. But the sound it made was unmistakable. The soft drag of limbs across wet stone. The pale figures above ground had been observers, but this presence was something else entirely. A remnant of the moon-eyed people's descent into the earth, shaped by darkness and time into something that no longer resembled the stories. Dante stepped back instinctively, but the chamber responded. The floor beneath him shifted, the walls tightened, and the movement in the corner grew more defined. A limb extended, pale and elongated and jointed in a way that suggested it had maybe once been human. The skin stretched thin, almost translucent, revealing the faint pulse of something beneath. The limb braced against the stone, and the rest of the body followed, unfolding with a slow, predatory grace. Stalking. The creature's head lifted, and its eyes caught what little light filtered down. They were enormous, reflective and shimmering with a cold, moonlit sheen. The hum in the chamber shifted again, and the creature responded. Tilting its head as though listening to a signal Dante couldn't hear. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of small, uniform teeth. Stories had always said the moon-eyed people were gentle, driven out by the Cherokee, not for violence, but for their inability to survive in the sun. But the stories had never spoken of what happened to them underground, what hunger did to a people who lived in darkness, what shape desperation carved into bone. The creature edged ever closer, with the slow certainty of a predator that understood the limits of its prey. Each step was measured, deliberate. Dante's breath caught in his throat, and the creature paused, only a few feet away. Its body still half hidden by shadow, its eyes fixed on him with a focus that felt almost clinical. It inhaled deeply, the sound wet and hollow, and the creature's posture changed. Its limbs tightened, its head lowered. The predatory stillness sharpened into intent. The creature moved with a certainty that left no room for misunderstanding. Its limbs unfolding in a slow, predatory arc, each joint bending with fluid precision. The air thickened with the pressure of something ancient reclaiming what was once lost. Dante stepped back, but the chamber again shifted with him. The soft, desiccated layer gave way under his weight, collapsing into a shallow depression that cradled him like a mould shaped by countless bodies before his. And the creature responded instantly. It lowered itself, limbs splaying outwards in a posture that was neither animal nor human. Its eyes widened. Its pupils didn't contract, they didn't move. It just absorbed. It moved closer, its limbs scraping softly across the stone, leaving faint streaks of moisture. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing those small uniform teeth, not made for tearing, but for wearing down, for grinding. The stories had always said the Moon-Eyed people were gentle. What rituals emerged when light became myth and survival became worship? The creature reached Dante. Its hand, if you could call it that, pressed against Dante's chest. The skin was impossibly cold. The pressure was light at first, exploratory, as though confirming the shape of him. Then it tightened. Not crushing, but claiming. The floor beneath Dante softened even further. Not a fall, a sinking downwards inch by inch, a slow, inevitable descent. The creature leaned closer, its breath damp and hollow, carrying the scent of stone and stagnant water. Its eyes filled his vision, vast, empty. Hunger shaped by centuries of darkness. Hunger that had learned patience. Hunger that had learned ritual. The earth swallowed Dante up to his knees, and the creature's mouth opened wider. The teeth were small, countless, arranged in perfect rows. Not meant to kill quickly, not meant to kill at all, but meant to consume, methodically. The earth reached Dante's waist. The pale figures above ground shifted in unison, their bodies aligning with the pulse rising from below. They weren't just witnesses, they were participants. The creature pressed its forehead to Dante's as the earth closed over his ribs. The forest above never marked the moment Dante Smith disappeared. No broken branches, no scattered leaves, no sign of a struggle. And by morning, the clearing looked as it always had. The stone wall, the soil undisturbed, the trees standing in their patient, watchful rows. For the mountains remember what they take. And sometimes, if the night is still enough, a low hum rises from beneath the ridge, a pulse in the earth, a reminder that some stories do not end at the surface. They continue downwards into the dark, where the Moon-Eyed people keep their rituals and keep their hunger. The pale below. And if you listen closely, you might hear it. A faint tapping, stone against stone, calling you home. Thank you for descending with me into the loam tonight. If this story leaves you feeling unsettled, if it lingered or whispered its way under your skin, please do like and share. It helps the echoes travel further into the pale below. So until next time, wayward souls, keep your lantern close and your footsteps light. And remember, they're watching.